The Cowboys are staring down the barrel of one of the most nerve-wracking draft nights in years, and what happens at pick 12 could literally determine whether this defense goes from historically bad to playoff contender or stays in the basement for another season. And before we get into it, you need to hit that subscribe button right now because we are covering every single Cowboys draft update the second it drops, and I'm seeing way too many of you watching without subscribing, so do me a favor, click it because you don't want to miss what could be the most important offseason moves this franchise makes in the next 5 years. Now, let me paint you the dream scenario that's floating around Cowboys Nation right now because it involves trading back from 12 and still landing impact defenders that fix the glaring holes on this roster. The idea is simple, but here's where it gets interesting. What if someone falls in love with a quarterback like Ty Simpson and they're sitting there at 15 or 16 losing their mind thinking he's about to get sniped, and they call Dallas offering extra picks to jump up and grab their guy? The Cowboys slide back a few spots, pick up additional draft capital, maybe another third or fourth rounder, and they still get their hands on guys who can start day one at positions of desperate need like inside linebacker, safety, or even depth along the offensive line if things shake out weird. One name that keeps getting thrown around is Dane Tucker for offensive line depth. And honestly, when I first started evaluating him, I thought he was a fourth or fifth round guy, someone you target on day 3 to develop and add competition. But the more tape you watch, the more you realize this class is just built different, and Tucker ended up sliding to that 6th round range for a lot of evaluators, even though his skill set screams potential starter down the line if he lands in the right system. The thing is, even if Tucker isn't your guy at 20, there are plenty of defenders who make sense at that spot. Guys like Faulk, who I know some of you don't love, and trust me, I'm not doing backflips over him either. But the gap between him and someone like Meador isn't as massive as people think. It's just how this year's board is stacking up, and you might have to get comfortable with players who aren't perfect but fill a role. Then you've got edge rushers, and that's where things get spicy, because if you can land someone like TJ Allen or Kiat Scott, you're addressing that pass rush need that's been haunting this team since they let Randy Gregory walk and DeMarcus Lawrence aged out of his prime. Those two spots, edge and linebacker, become instantly more competitive, and you've got a foundation to build around, especially if your defensive coordinator actually knows how to scheme pressure instead of playing soft zone and praying for turnovers. Now let's talk about the live draft coverage, because April 24th is circled on my calendar, and we are going full throttle with live analysis right here, breaking down every single pick as it happens and giving you instant reaction to what the Cowboys do, whether it's a home run or a head scratcher. Here's a scenario that's been picking up steam lately. What if Cleveland stays at pick 2 after all the chaos of the Dexter Lawrence blockbuster trade and they take the Miami offensive tackle Mingoa? And before you say that doesn't affect Dallas, let me explain, because if the Browns don't trade down, that means the Giants sitting at 5 might pivot and take a tackle too, which sounds insane until you realize their offensive line is held together with duct tape and prayer. I initially misread one of these draft scenarios and thought Cleveland was trading up, but no, they're staying put and evaluating whether to grab a franchise left tackle like Proctor or Freeling or go defense with someone like Fondo. And that decision creates a domino effect that could absolutely change who's available when Dallas is on the clock at 12. The Browns might not get the trade offer they want, and that keeps them locked in at 2, which pushes other teams to reach earlier than expected, and maybe a stud defender slides right into Dallas's lap. Let me hit you with a player comparison that's been buzzing around the scouting community because it's both exciting and terrifying at the same time. What's Sonny Styles' ceiling and floor as a prospect? The ceiling is Fred Warner, and I know that sounds like hyperbole, but hear me out. Styles tested off the charts athletically, just like Warner did coming out, and if he develops that same elite instinct that Warner has, you're talking about a guy who can cover tight ends down the seam, blow up running plays in the A-gap, and quarterbacks have nightmares about for the next decade. The floor is Isaiah Simmons without the pass rush upside, and that's the scary part, because Simmons was supposed to be this transformational chess piece who could do everything, and he ended up being a guy who didn't have a true position and got moved around until he was just average. The difference is Warner came in raw on instincts too, but he developed that mental side of the game fast and became one of the best linebackers in football within 2 years. So the question is, does Styles have that same processing ability, or is he just an athletic freak who looks good in shorts? When you check his testing numbers, it's all edge rushers and linebackers in his comp range, because he's that explosive, and that should tell you the upside is absolutely immense, which is why he's shooting up draft boards, including mine. But here's where I start losing sleep at night, and maybe you will too. What if the Giants take both Downs and Styles and completely overhaul their defense in one draft? Imagine this nightmare. Styles goes at 5 and Downs goes at 10, and you're sitting there as a Cowboys fan getting your hopes up, thinking one of them might slide to 12, and then the Giants of all teams punch you square in the face and kick you in the ribs while you're down on the ground, and suddenly you don't get either player, and now you have to watch those two guys terrorize Dak Prescott twice a year for the next 5 seasons. That is the doomsday scenario that keeps me up at night, because the Giants need defensive help desperately, and if they're smart, they're looking at those two as franchise cornerstones who can change the entire identity of that unit. And the worst part is it's not even that crazy of a prediction, because both guys fit what the Giants need and they've got the draft capital to make it happen. My initial reaction when I mapped this out was just pure dread, like, great, now I have to watch Dallas get shut out of the top tier defenders and settle for plan C or D and hope they hit on a developmental guy who takes 3 years to figure it out. So let me ask you straight up, do you think the Cowboys get wiped out at pick 12, or do you think one of the elite defenders falls to them? Drop a comment and tell me yes, they get their guy, or no, they're getting jumped and screwed over, because I want to see where Cowboys Nation stands on this. Now let's talk trades, because there's been chatter about Dallas moving pick 20 and their third rounder, which is 92 overall, to the Chargers for their pick at 22 and their third at 86. And the idea is the Chargers are trying to jump Pittsburgh, who's sitting there at 21 and might be salivating over the best available wide receiver or offensive lineman on the board. The question is, does that trade make sense for Dallas? Because you're moving down 2 spots in round 1 and only moving up 4 spots in round 3, and that's not exactly highway robbery in terms of value. If you could tack on another day 3 pick, like a 6th rounder, then maybe it's worth it, but otherwise you're not getting enough back to justify losing position in the first round, especially if one of your guys is sitting there at 20 and you slide to 22 and watch him get snagged. The players Dallas should be praying for are Downs, Styles, Delaney, Reese, and Bailey. And if you give me any of those guys, I'm a happy camper, because they're all in my top 7, and there's a significant drop-off after that tier. Here's the reality check, though. The odds of one of those 6 defenders falling to 12 is maybe 50-50 at best, and honestly, it's probably closer to 30%. It's possible, but it's not something you can bank on, and that's why I'm going to be more nervous on draft night than I've been in 2 years, because this isn't like the CD Lamb draft where you knew the value was insane, and Dallas lucked into a top 5 talent falling to them. This year, the board is tighter, the needs are more desperate, and one wrong move means you're reaching on a guy who's a second-round talent at pick 12, and that sets your rebuild back another year. So when I'm sitting here doing live coverage on draft night, just know my heart rate is going to be spiking every time a team ahead of Dallas makes a pick, because one surprise selection changes everything. Let me ask you this. If you had to choose, would you rather have Styles plus a second-round linebacker like Stokes, or Downs plus a linebacker like J-Rod or C.J. Allen? And this is tough, because Downs is a couple spots higher on my board than Styles, but Stokes is a second-round grade around pick 48, and I've got guys like J-Rod and Allen ranked higher, so if you swap Stokes for one of them, it changes the equation. Personally, I'm taking Downs and insert elite linebacker here, because that gives you 2 spots of immediate impact, and you feel great about your defensive foundation going into the season. But let's get real for a second. If the Cowboys draft well defensively, what's the ceiling for this team in 2025? And my answer is playoff contender, but with a huge asterisk. If you land 2 legitimate starters on defense in this draft, guys who come in and play right away, and your offense is a top 5 unit again, which it should be with Dak, CD, and a healthy offensive line, then yeah, you can make the playoffs and maybe even win a game or 2 if things break right. The question is, does this defense go from 32nd in the league to 20th, or does it jump all the way to 12th? Because 20th gets you in the playoffs, but you're getting bounced in the wild card round. 12th gives you a chance to make noise and actually compete with the big boys in the NFC. My dream pick is still Downs, and I've been on that train since day one. I got my hopes up a few weeks ago when it looked like he might actually slide, and then reality set in, and I tempered expectations back to normal levels, because getting your heart broken on draft night is a Cowboys fan tradition at this point. Here's another wild scenario. What if Dallas trades up to 9 to jump the Giants and grab Downs before they can take him? And the first question is, are the Chiefs even open to it? Because Kansas City wants Caleb Davis, and they might also be thinking, hey, we can sit here at 9 and get Downs or Tyson or whoever we want, and if we trade back, we slide behind the Giants and lose our guy. If the Chiefs are locked in on Jordan Tyson and the rumors are they love him, then trading down isn't happening, because they're not risking letting New York snipe their target. So Dallas would have to blow them away with an offer, and I'm talking multiple picks or future assets, and I don't think the front office wants to mortgage that kind of capital when they've got 2 first-rounders already. The smarter play is probably staying put and hoping the board falls your way, but hoping isn't a strategy, and that's what scares me. You can't control what happens at picks 1 through 11, and if teams start reaching for quarterbacks or offensive linemen early, then maybe a defender slides, but if everyone plays it straight, you're getting the 7th or 8th best defensive player player at 12, and that might not be good enough to fix this dumpster fire. Let me hit you with the absolute worst case scenario, because we need to talk about it. What happens if all the good defensive players are gone at 12, and I mean completely wiped off the board? Let's say Downs, Styles, Delaney, Reese, Bailey, and Bain are all gone, and McCoy is off the board because of medical red flags that teams can't get comfortable with, and Thiemann is gone too, or Dallas doesn't think he fits as a nickel corner in their system. Now you're sitting there staring at guys like Meador, Hood, Faulk, maybe Chris Johnson, or a wide receiver like Jordan Tyson, and you're trying to figure out if you reach or if you desperately try to trade down and pray someone says yes. The gap between Meador at 18 on most boards and someone like Malachi Lawrence at 47 isn't that big, and that's the problem. If you're stuck in no man's land where you don't love the value at 12, but you can't find a trade partner, you're in one of those drafts where the board just didn't shake out, right? And you have to settle. Honestly, if it came down to it and Faulk or Hood were the best options left, I'd probably take Hood at 12 and Faulk at 20 if he's still there, and just accept that this wasn't the dream draft. But you still added two players who can contribute. It's not sexy, but it's reality. And the Cowboys don't exactly have a track record of getting lucky on draft night, even though the CeeDee Lamb draft was a rare exception. Now let's talk about a potential trade that could happen on draft night or shortly after, and that's the Jordan Brooks scenario. What would Dallas have to give up to land him? And one idea floating around is trading pick 20 for Miami's 30th and swapping a fourth rounder to get Brooks in return. The question is, does Miami ask for more than that? Because 20 to 30 is essentially third round pick value. And if you're also giving up a fourth to get a fourth back, you're basically nullifying that compensation. So maybe the realistic trade is 20 for 30 straight up. And Brooks comes over without any pick swaps, or maybe it's a post draft deal like they did with Pickens, where they let the draft play out, see who's available at 92, and then revisit the conversation in the days after. Brooks would instantly upgrade the linebacker room and give you a legitimate 3-down player who can cover and tackle, and suddenly that second level doesn't look like a high school JV squad anymore. But you've got to be smart about the price, because overpaying for a good, not great linebacker when you've got holes everywhere on defense is how you end up mediocre for another 3 years. Here's what nobody is talking about enough, and it's driving me crazy. How much does the Dexter Lawrence trade change the entire top 10 of this draft? When the Giants moved him, they signaled they're either going full rebuild or they're retooling around young defensive pieces, and that means they might be aggressive in taking defenders early, which screws Dallas, because every defender that goes before 12 is one less option on the board. And if you thought the Cowboys were going to sit back and have their pick of elite talent, you might be in for a rude awakening. The ripple effect of that trade is going to hit the Cowboys whether they want it to or not, because it changes how teams value positions and whether they're willing to move up or down. And if the Giants go defense heavy early, it means Dallas is fighting with teams in the middle of the first round for scraps, and that's not a position you want to be in when your defense was the worst in football last year. Let me ask you this. What's your confidence level in the Cowboys nailing this draft on a scale of 1 to 10? Drop it in the comments, because I'm genuinely curious if fans think this front office has learned from past mistakes, or if we're headed for another Tyler Guyton situation where we reach on a project and hope for the best. One more thing I want to address, because it keeps coming up. What if the Cowboys take Keldric Faulk at pick 12 straight up, no trade down, just Faulk as the selection? And honestly, I don't know if I'd be mad or just whelmed, because he's not in my top 20, but he's right outside of it. If the board falls in a way where all the elite defenders are gone and Faulk is genuinely the best player available, then fine, I can live with it, especially at pick 20 where the value makes more sense. But at 12, you better be damn sure he's your guy, because if you whiff on that pick and he's a rotational player instead of a starter, you just wasted a top 15 selection on a defense that can't afford to miss. The difference between hitting on 12 and missing is literally the difference between playoffs and another 8-win season where you're stuck in purgatory. And I don't think Cowboys fans can handle another year of watching this defense get shredded by every competent offense in the league. The pressure is on the front office to get this right. And I mean really right, not just kind of right where you draft a guy who's fine but not great. You need impact players who change games and make quarterbacks uncomfortable and turn the ball over. And right now, this roster doesn't have enough of those guys. So here's my final take on all of this. The Cowboys are in a spot where they can dramatically improve this defense if the draft falls right and they make smart decisions, but they're also one bad break away from reaching on players and setting this rebuild back another year. The dream scenario is Downs or Styles falls to 12, and you pair them with a linebacker or safety at 20, and suddenly you've got two foundational pieces on defense that you can build around for the next 5 years. The nightmare scenario is the Giants take both of them, and Dallas is left scrambling trying to convince themselves that plan C is actually good enough when deep down you know it's not. I've been doing this long enough to know that draft night is chaos and anything can happen, but I also know that the Cowboys have to be aggressive if they want to compete in the NFC because the Eagles and 49ers aren't slowing down. And if you stand pat and hope for the best, you're going to get left behind. So whether it's trading up to 9 or staying at 12 and praying or even trading back and accumulating picks, the front office has to nail this because the margin for error is gone. Make sure you're subscribed because we're going live on draft night with full coverage and instant reactions, and you don't want to miss it. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What move do you want Dallas to make at 12? And do you trust this front office to get it right, or are you already preparing for disappointment? Let's get this defense fixed and get back to being a legitimate Super Bowl contender because I'm tired of watching this team waste talent and fall short when it matters most. Now drop your take in the comments and let's talk Cowboys draft strategy because April 24th is going to be here before you know it, and we need to be ready for whatever chaos comes our way.